Hey folks, Nick Tockert here with the Historical Fencing Guild. Seems we're having a little bit of technical difficulties. There we go. Before we get into it, the Historical Fencing Guild is brought to you by my amazing patrons who are listed down below. As the names scroll, I am eternally grateful to you and your service. We're also made possible with the love and support of our good friends over at the Independent Creator Directory. That's IndieCD.org, your one-stop shop for the best and the brightest authors, artists, and musicians. We're also made possible by sales of the Simple Sword, the Fighting Axe, and the Simple Spear, all part of our ongoing series of Western martial arts manuals designed to help you go from having never handled a sword to teaching the art to others. Before we go any farther, we need to talk about what today's subject matter is. And as I put up both in the thumbnail and in seeking the universal versus the specific and adaptability over optimization, why I study, teach, and practice like I do. This is going to be an open-ish discussion. So if there are comments and they apply, I will address them. But I was posed a question. I was posed a question while I was looking into some small sword specific techniques. Why do I not train in this technique or this school of thought versus others? What is the point, and why is the Simple Sword written the way it is? The purpose of what I do has been shaped from its very beginning to help people who many times are non-standard students. These are people perhaps over the more traditional age, people of genders that are not necessarily accepted well, ethnicities, people of color, people of different orientations, and people of different physical health levels, as well as myself. Now, it is important to understand that I have come upon a few wisdoms in my many years of looking into things. And I am a neurodivergent, so I have a great many things I've looked into either of a shallow survey level or very deep. And I find the same patterns. One of these patterns is that after having 80% of understanding of any given subject, the amount of energy that you have to put into said subject greatly skyrockets. It basically goes exponential very quickly. And I find that most people, when they have an interest in a topic, they pick one version of the topic and they deep dive in. And that's where they go, and that's what they know. And that's totally valid. That's where we get champions from. This is where we get true in-depth expertise of the finest of instructors, the finest of philosophers on any given subject, the finest thinkers. I do not include myself in that number. I am and have always been a generalist. And where most people, when they study a broad topic from different perspectives, look for the differences. What differentiates this government type of government from that type of government? What differentiates this policy from this policy? Difference. And what I tend to do is, whenever possible, I want to find what they all agree upon. So, do they all agree on a given idea? If so, why? Do they all or almost all oppose a certain idea? Then why? That was my original doctrine towards studying Western martial arts. Because I was sitting there as someone relatively new to this who had dabbled in a few other things growing up, different weapons, looking for what could only be described as versatility, not necessarily superiority. I don't know where I heard it, but someone said I would rather be the best cook among engineers and the best engineer among cooks than the best of either. This mentality permeates my approach, that 80%, because then I can take that huge excess amount of energy, stretch it out, and learn 80% of something else. And I've used that to get a very broad median of knowledge, and most importantly, how to get more. So if I do need to deep dive a subject, I've studied the art of study. I've studied metacognition, what works best for me. That way, if I don't have the knowledge or I can't access it because of memory issues or rust, I know how, if I have access to my resources, to gain it or regain it. Now, if you study solely one weapon, you will be more likely to master said weapon much more quickly, that is, than if you elect to only pursue lightly a large number of styles. Now, when I came into it, people were arguing. They were saying Fiore is better than Fabris. No, you should be looking at the Germanic systems. Oh no, Meyer reigns above all. And people were arguing over weapons. They were arguing over rigs, what type of rigging, what stance, a cacophony of noise, and everyone arguing. So I started reading the manuals on a basis of accessibility. I did not seek out a specific trainer. I sought out what I could get my furry little paws on, get my mitts around, and dig in, and I took notes. And then I got hold of another one, and I took notes, and I cross-referenced. And instead of focusing on the differences, I cross-referenced on what works across. And this is something that's fairly common knowledge on this channel, especially where historical fencing in the vein of rapier and adjacent styles lives. Now, that philosophy is great. That philosophy is good. It has served me very well. But it is not just on one axis that I take this approach. So I didn't just study rapier to get where I felt competent, okay? I consider myself a sword master because that term was, basically handed to me as one of the few that wasn't claimed by something in the specific organization I was in. And because I literally spent my time teaching basic swordsmanship to anyone who wanted to learn. And as soon as they got more advanced than what I was teaching, they would either seek out more instruction or I would direct them to more instruction, either through the route of manuals and books and videos or individuals that I knew at the time. I'm sadly not as connected as I used to be. But in the pursuit of that, I started crossing styles. Now, I'd already dabbled a little bit in Boken work. I had spent an extensive amount of time behind agricultural axes. And sticks and staves are things I just happened to pick up through necessity. But then I began to look into it more and more. And as I looked into the different martial arts and what they did, I found many of the Eastern martial arts seem very strange, unarmed. The motions are very weird until you realize that the motions of that art will work open-handed, but they're geared much more towards the relative weapons associated with that art. And that began to form in me this quandary where if I look at look at weapons, melee weapons, the way I looked at rapier styles, I could go, what motions are viable and applicable to the vast majority of melee-based weapons? And from there, it gave me a basis, because my mentality is that of a modern man. The vast majority of people do not carry a weapon at all, to be honest. Certainly not an intentional weapon. Looking into techniques, and of the melee weapons many people carry, they're still limited to essentially knife, baton, staff, mass weapon. And then you get into some weird things. Like I have that's things like flail devices, anything as odd as a cue ball in a tube sock, weird things like that. Knuckle dusters, which I don't count training wise as a weapon as much as an extension of pugilism. That's just very aggressive pugilism, which I have no problem with. Pugilism, boxing, any striking-based martial art has its place, but none of them are a complete toolbox. So the arc of my pursuit, and this is what I recommend for the more practically minded Western martial artist, is to find what can be used the most versatilely, with the most adaptive option. And adaptivity is something we will discuss as well, because I'm not just looking at it from technique scope and difficulty axis. I'm looking at it from an axis of where it stands on accessibility, both physically and financially, let alone physically available. I am not walking around carrying a greatsword. I have very little chance of walking around carrying a greatsword. So weapon styles that could only theoretically apply to greatsword, in their conclusiveness, would not work for my approach. However, when you start looking at things like Kali, Arnis, a few other things, Screamo, you start to find that the patterns are built to be used fairly universally. And you start to find trends, both in weapon design and then weapon function. One thing I find is that there is a near phallic. I believe I have a cat in this room that I did not know was trapped in here because, like, oh, hi, Snicky. I didn't know you were in here. Okay. Sorry, I have a cat in here. The fixation on, again, great swords, long swords, they're fun, but they're extra fun when you're looking at it in a duel 1v1. And again, there are a great many techniques that are wonderful for 1v1 fighting. However, said techniques do not work well in melee combat universally. If you can do it in a melee, you can do it mostly in 1v1. But if you can do it in 1v1, it's not guaranteed to work in a melee. Does that understand? Group dynamics versus single. And I have found in my self-defense experience through a storied and questionably spent youth, rarely is it 1v1, and never is it fair. There are no weight ranks in physical altercations. There are no coaches. There are no bells to let you know it's started, to let you know it's over. This leads to a dangerous form of training scar. So I don't dabble in that much. The other factor is the difficulty of execution greatly limits what I train in. And what I mean by that is when you have a chronic illness or injury, as I do, I have nerve damage in my back, hips, legs, arms. I have neuropathy. I cannot say it properly, but a type of minor paralysis. I'm numb in places. It's a whole thing. And on a good day, I can be quite formidable. I can move well. I can move efficiently. I can move surprisingly quickly over short distances. And I'm not entirely that weak. But on a bad day, I lack that option. So if I were to train with the mentality of what I can do on a good day, not only solely, but primarily, on a bad day, I am far weaker. Does that make sense? That mental calibration. Whereas when one is fighting on a bad day, which I insist I do if I am at all physically able, because on a bad day, fleeing is equally unlikely. I simply can't. I have to look at what my options are. So, whereas the champion mentality focuses on a single style, a single set of techniques, building and shaping their body as much as humanly possible to best facilitate the peak performance of these techniques. I don't have those luxuries, and neither have many of my students. So this brings us back again to 80%, because energy is something, as my son would say, are you low on stamina? Is your stamina running out? That's a real option. That means I'm not going to have extra energy for pretty. I'm not going to have extra energy for distractions unless they're, very deliberate. It has to be get in, get out. So I train with that in mind. And I train every day. Now, there are days where I can't stand, so I train sitting. There are days where my arms won't work right, but my legs are doing okay. So I do my lunges. I'm always working what I have in the toolbox at hand. So this puts a very different spin on it. It also means I don't have the luxury of pleasurable bias. I don't have the luxury of intellectual bias when it comes to the styles. It means I have to look into just about everything, whether it's a style I am really interested in or not, by its function, not its nationality, not its historical period. So I am ex-SCA. When I was SCA, I worked very late period. Okay. My persona was a very late to out of period persona. When I study, I don't get to say, I just want to study Spanish rapier. Because Spanish rapier, as much as I love it, does not always cooperate with the way my body wants to move, although often it does, certainly more often than some of the more elaborate, extreme lunge-based Italian styles. I have to go through like it's all a buffet and pick from any given style that I see what works for me and field test it and study it and then apply it. And what I've learned, as I learn it, I pass it on. I've been doing this for a long time. This, in part, was born from observing my first real instructor who had rheumatoid arthritis that greatly limited his mobility. He could only do a few very specific physical motions. And that allowed him, when he was clear-minded about it, to focus on only doing what he could and disregarding if it was something he couldn't do. He had to find a way to solve the problem either by getting out, getting inside, or using the tool set that he had. That mentality means if you have a limitation of your own, usually I can help you work through it. But it requires a surrender of false pride, a surrender of a certain type of fantasy hope. I'm not going to get in a sword clench and likely, just throw the person aside. I lack the physical strength to do that. If I try, I will fail. Frankly, if we're honest, because of the damage to my wrists and things, and my grip issues, I have to have very specific types of grip to allow for my hands to work when they don't want to. But if I'm training that way, if I'm training to use something that's 24 inches long, most of the parry daggers I used were 18-inch blades. Ended up roughly 24-inch overall. A lot of machetes you find are between 18 and 22, 24-inch because it's a very comfortable draw in tight quarters where a machete may be deployed. Well, why don't you train with something longer? Because I may end up in tight quarters. I would rather forego a potential advantage in a convenient time than train something that won't be available at an inconvenient time. Also, when I look at my concussive blows, so that is cutting into and out of any of the guards, especially 5 through 8 of, my system. It's designed where if I'm doing it one-handed, same motion. Two-handed. If I'm using an edged weapon, I can do it. If I'm using a stick, I can do it. If I'm using a mass weapon with slight adjustment, I can still use the exact same gross motor skills to achieve my given target. Which, for the purpose of this, is not even success or defeat. It is trying to successfully perform what I am trying to successfully perform. It may not be the correct maneuver in that given situation. This is something I have to explain to my students. But I would rather have somebody make a mistake in judgment, but perform the maneuver fairly in the proper time and speed, then while they're learning, then get faster to meet the sudden need. Because when you have the if you do it right and consistently, your judgment evolves in the background, and your judgment will be able to take over in that sense and allow for you not to have to shift, because you'll be making not just the right answer, but the correct one. The right answer is to block, a given attack. The correct answer is to block it with what you need to. That can only be achieved by having the experience behind it. It's precision versus accuracy. In marksmanship, precision is how close your shots are to each other. Accuracy is how close they are to the bullseye. You have to, in marksmanship of any kind, archery, firearms, slingshot, Nerf gun, whatever, first you have to design precision. You have to be getting very similar results out of what you do every time. So if you're missing, you need to be missing in the same relative area every time, because then we can adjust your aim or adjust your grip or adjust something. But you can't adjust something if you aren't getting measurable results. That mentality boils down. So my preferred studies are techniques that I can use with a long weapon, a short weapon, even a tiny weapon, a mass weapon. Techniques I can use with a blunt weapon, with an edged weapon. Okay? This is because I have to mentally be prepared to improvise my equipment should it be necessary. And it's funny because that mentality allows me to see and manufacture improvised trainers instantly and more readily than some people who are so used to having to use the proper tool. For me, the thing with the most flux is the exact nature of the tool itself. I can use an arming sword to teach fencing techniques. I can use a foil to teach fencing techniques. I can use a katana to teach fencing techniques. I could, as long as it is roughly it is a rigid object that will hold up to the motions that I am putting it through. It may not hold up to contact, but as long as it holds up to the motion, I can use that to give at least some measure of instruction. Now, material evaluation, that's a whole nother thing. But we need to be able to be enlightened towards the technique. Only then do we worry about the tool. My dad has a saying, it's one I quote frequently to my students. It's not the wrench, it's the mechanic. And right now, especially with the way our American society especially is geared to maintain a consumerist lower class, they have to preach that it's the shoes. Michael Jordan could fly. I cannot describe what it was like to see, I'm not a sports guy, but see a clip of Michael Jordan in real time doing a slam dunk, and just, you swear he just hangs there. And they would show it, and then they cut into the sneakers he's wearing. It wasn't the sneakers. It was never the sneakers. I'm sure they might make it nicer. They're certainly nicer than bare feet. They're better than dense shoes. But the sneakers are not, for the vast majority, going to give much, especially in difference to other sneakers. As you get higher end, yes, you can. You will feel the differences in things. You will start to get feedback from the balance and such. Sure, when you are really into what you're doing, it's there. But if you're improvising anyway, you have to accept a little slop in the standards. Not AI. No. I'm not talking about AI-generated garbage. I'm talking about wiggle room in the mechanics of the device itself. This matters, that you have the flexibility to understand that. This has shaped the basis of everything I do. It's in part why I'm so good at as a beginning instructor, and I make no qualms. I have no qualms admitting that that's what I am. I am a basic level instructor. I can take somebody from having handled the sword to teaching the art at a basic level to others, which is my definition of mastery. If you understand the basics well enough to teach the basics to someone else, you have mastered the basics. Everything else is personal development. And for me, the basics, to be classified as a basic, it has to be as versatile, as foundational as humanly possible. It is far, far more important that with a sword, you can throw a proper chamber and throw a smooth, repetitive thrust every time than it is that you can cavazione around into, a cut into third or whatever. Because you can't do the fancy stuff if you don't understand the basics. And at the end of the day, the vast majority of time, the basics will give you what you need. It's that 80 percentile. Yes, there are people who will be better than you. Yes, you can be better individually than the basics. And you can pick up other things and alter and tailor your technique to you. That is the end goal. As an instructor, I'm first to make sure you are safe, you are having some measure of fun, and you are skilled. That's what I want. That's what I teach. Efficacy comes from how much effort you put into it, how much you're willing to communicate, how much you're willing to do the homework. Because I can tell. If I say you're having trouble with your lunges, go home, work on your footwork. If you come back next week and you haven't worked on your footwork, it doesn't matter how much you lie to me, I'm going to see that you haven't. That's your responsibility. And the responsibility of working to develop and maintain a foundation upon which all these other styles can be built is something that's on you. I can encourage it. I can give systems. I can give advice. But at the end of the day, it's on you, the student, to do the work. You have to put in the hours. Because there is a bell curve of boredom with learning the basics. Like when you first are learning them, the basics are really cool. You've never handled a sword before. You're holding a sword. You're doing this. You want to be it. And as you train, it gets old fast. And that part, that upswing, is what burns out so many people, especially when you combine it with injury, when you combine it with countering interests, different scheduling. It gets old. And you reach a peak where many, many people drop out. But then, if you've really devoted long enough, and it's different for everybody, it starts becoming less boring. You start to go, hey. And after a while, you come back around to it mattering, to the idea that developing the precision matters. There's a story, I'm paraphrasing, about a grandfather who learned Tai Chi. He taught his son, he taught his grandson. Like 24 form Tai Chi. And the grandson would come out in the morning with his dad and his grandpa. And he was confused, and he was genuinely worried about his grandfather because they'd be going through the motions, and he'd have to, the grandson would have to stop and think, okay, I've done this, I need to transfer to this maneuver, to this, and rotate through and work at it and figure it out. Meanwhile, the dad, it was fluid, just doing his thing. But then he noticed that Grandpa would stutter. He might stop in the middle. And instead of moving on, reset and do the same motion again. And to the grandson, it looked completely identical. And then maybe after a couple tries, he'd go on to the next. And then at some point along on any given day, he'd stop, reset, and do the extras at just a monstrously, painfully slow speed. And he went to his dad. He said, Dad, I think Grandpa's going senile. Because you know far more than me. And you glide through the motions. And I have to think about the motions. But Grandpa should know more than you. But he's on really simple stuff. He's stopping and resetting and looking at it. That moment when you're have come full circle around to the other side of the boredom arc is when you start let me rephrase, when you're learning, your mind is telling your body about the movement. Okay? So using my system, keeping things simple with the amazing invisible sword, which you can use your thumb. If you have nothing else, you can drill with your thumb surprisingly well. Gonna start in third, rotate in second, come around. Start in third, rotate into fourth, come around. My thumb is the tip of my blade. Boom. Right? When it's time to do it, the dad does it. He moves on. Boom, boom. He's checking the boxes, going through the motion. It's part of his day, but it's a state of no thought. He's just doing it for the practice sessions. The son is thinking desperately to remember the motion. The grandfather is revisiting the basics, not to tell his body what to do, but to understand what his body is telling him about what he's doing. That's where it goes from knowledge to wisdom, from absorbing and regurgitating to understanding. And the only way to get to understanding is to go through this whole arc of feeling like a fool as a student and learning. You go through this gate of being a fool, and then you go through this gate of building your stamina. You go through this gate of understanding if you do it long enough. And then you come back around to the gate and you look up and you're back at the gate of the fool. But this time, instead of learning that you're a fool, you accept that you're a fool. You look for what the motion is teaching you. And how to fine tune. And you keep this cycle up. And you learn new techniques, but then at the end of the day, you come back to the basics. And by studying this way, it's evolving. It can involve, when you have the right systems, you can evolve internally. Dangerous word to use in what I'm going to say, because some people will run with this, is you cultivate your techniques. You feed them, you water them, you observe them, give them what they need, and they bloom. And it takes time, because no amount of genius at the beginning offsets fully time behind the sword. And as our skills and understanding develop, we run into a cruel nature, a cruel fact that our bodies become less useful. Our bodies betray us as we age. And you're warned about it as a young man, but you never believe it till it starts to happen. Now, as somebody who's had many debilitating injuries and has had to recover from them to try to get back where I was many times, I feel a familiarity in this resistance. And I know there will come a day where I am not as good as I was. I'm not as good as I once was right now. But I see more. My body does not do what I would have it do like it used to. Squandered or well spent, depending on who you talk to, that time is long past for me. So when I drill, I have to listen to what my body says. And it is so much easier. Easier isn't the right word. So much more comfortable dealing with that if you understand it's coming. If you understand that the elaborate techniques may not work for you always. And I've been gifted to know that. I've been gifted through adversity to constantly be reminded how important it is to simplify, simplify, simplify. And you just get brought back to the beginning and you have to build back up over and over again. And it means there are heights I will never know. And I accept that. But it also means when I'm talking to someone who is starting greatly behind the ball, someone who is limited physically or emotionally, I understand what it's like to be limited, and I remember it acutely, both from the temporary limitations that I had in the past to the permanent ones I deal with every single day. And the reason why at almost 45, I am still doing something most people who participate stop in their 20s is because I never stopped. I just let it adjust. Now, my 45 is a lot more beat up, a lot more damaged than many other people's 45, and I understand that. And I know there will come a day where I will not be able to function as I would. But having a style that is malleable and simple, that is a root, is far superior, in my opinion, thank you, Emily, than burning out. Because my job has never been to be that skyrocket that inspires people. That's not who I am. That's not what I am. I'm not the ooh, ah. I'm the guy who functions as an umbrella in the rain. I'm the guy who, the same umbrella doubles as a cane when you need it. It's not pretty. People may make fun of it compared to other things. But that's why. That versatility. That's why when I tell you to train, don't go. There's nothing wrong with elaborate styles like capoeira. It's beautiful. It's dynamic. If you do it, it can keep, something like that. If you have the body that allows you to maintain it, you can maintain it and do dramatic, beautiful things. I mean, it's a dance. It's insane. But if you don't have a body that can do that, a lot of those techniques simply fall away as impossibilities. As long as I can keep aware of my timing and my measure, there's the vast majority of attacks I can redirect and absorb, can redirect and respond. I'm not going to be the quick jump start, bam, go the vast majority of times. And that's okay, because I know that system will work towards me. That's why I'm constantly looking for, guys, I have switched to these from the beautiful steel rapiers because they're 20th the price of many steel rapiers. For the cost of a new steel rapier, I can get 20 of these in cases. Maybe I can only get 10. Okay, let's say it's only 10. 10 to 1. What can I do more good with? Further, these are a few ounces. These are not pounds. Due to my weakened grip, that matters. By adjusting the tool, I can adjust my technique. That's why I talk about these. I want you, if you are learning martial arts, if you're pursuing Western martial arts, if you're learning to sword fight, I want you to have a technique and a system that you can learn when you're 15 and still practice when you're 50. So I'm always chasing this. I want it to be something that everyone can afford. And with current financial situations in the world, $50 is a lot. $60 is a lot. But somewhere between those two numbers will get you 2 of these, which means you and a friend can pool to order 2, and you'll be able to spar. This is a huge gift. This is a huge opportunity, because that's the cost of materials to make a lot of the basic trainers. And I am so honored that you say such wonderful things to me, Emily. Incredibly happy. I'm a softy old man. I'll get all misty-eyed if I'm not careful. But that's what I want for you guys. I don't want to train you in an art that, you'll have a good shot at becoming local or state or some level champion, and then never be able to walk after, unaided after you're 40. I don't like destructive arts. I want sustainability. I want simplicity. I want ease of understanding and use. It does come. It comes at the price that I came in second in almost every tourney I ever entered. There was always a bigger fish. Vast majority of the time, just sincerely a bigger fish. Sometimes they were less honorable than others, and that's okay too. But my measure was never my target. That was never my goal. My goal was and is to share something that helped me when nothing else would. That being the vast majority of everything good in my life as an adult has been carved out from behind a training sword. It allows me to take my anger and my fear and my frustrations and put it into something that teaches, to take the desire to destroy and put it into something that heals. It is alchemy of the highest order. And I am trying to make that always available at as low an outlay, as low a physical cost, as low as a temporal cost, as low as a financial cost. Heck, as low as a social cost. That's why I've worked with people who are part of other groups, and I trained them in secret so that they could get better without any unnecessary stigma. Because building people up, helping people go a little bit farther while I'm here. If I'm going to live this life, if I'm going to wake up in the morning and go to sleep in the evening, or the morning, if you know how late I stay up sometimes, in between, I'd like to do some good. If I can make someone happy, I consider it a privilege, especially if they're kind. The world is full of deception. It is full of confusion. And it's full of cruelty. And I think a lot of it stems from a simple set of philosophical truths that many of which my father taught me. Life is simple, it just isn't easy. Whenever we try to make things easy, it becomes complicated. At the end of the day, when you're overwhelmed, sometimes the only thing you can do is simplify. Look at what you can do and do it. What you can't do, you're going to have to figure out later who can help you or if you can do without it. It's not happy, but it's true. That's how I approach my swordsmanship. It's why I don't teach deep lunge techniques often. And having the mental flexibility, the earnest critical thinking, not just on others, but of yourself and your capabilities, and to be able to understand your capabilities, understand your limitations, understand the limitations that can be addressed and the ones that simply are omnipresent. What you can do and what you can't do. And then doing the best you can do in the kindest way possible to not just others, but to yourself. That's the philosophical goal behind all this. The world is filled to the brim with the strong, the powerful, and the motivated. The world is filled to the brim with would-be leaders and petty dictators. The world is full of chest-beating, Neanderthals claiming to be heroic. But the world is also, it's full of, and it is needing people of principle principle, people of kindness, and heroes who are not, they are not heroes for the glory. They're not heroes for the prestige. The real heroes are the ones who are out there giving of themselves to help others. Right now, there's a young lady in my chat who is a lifeguard. Now, that sounds tongue-in-cheek. A great many people will get financially, well, that's whatever. Those people don't matter. Anyone who is willing to jump into the water to attempt to take someone drowning to shore when they could not do it themselves, that is pretty damned heroic. Most people don't understand how dangerous someone drowning is. How readily, in their fear and panic, they can pull you down. They can drown you. That means whoever's doing that lifeguarding is not only giving their time and their attention to watch with purpose, they are doing so knowing they may have to risk their life to save yours. There are good police officers who operate that way. There are good firemen. I know EMTs. I know a lot of first responders. And there are people who pursue that kind of mentality for the people who are mentally hurting, who build up those who would be neglected and forgotten otherwise. These people get it. And if perhaps teaching people to sword fight is enough for them to become the main character in their life, especially the people who the world is told can't, especially the people who just want not just necessarily heroism or glory, they just want to exist. They don't, it's not that they're worried about achieving their dreams. Many of these people just want the opportunity to try. And I've had the privilege at times to be there to put a trainer in somebody's hand and say, here, try. Even if you fail face down in the dirt, if you are one of those people who try, by God, you matter. And every time you get back up from the proverbial or literal face down in the dirt, that's heroism. And if you do it in such a way that you can serve others, heck yes. But the hardest thing I have found is finding people who will believe in you to do it. Okay? To help others. Many times, like today, I am speaking into the void. There may be somebody watching very appreciative when she came by. I may not. The other question I have received is then why do you keep doing it? You know there are times you'll miss it because of your needs. I keep doing it in hopes that if not now, sometime, if not someone in my chat, someone down the line will stumble upon a video like this when they need it. That somehow, without my direct presence, without my direct intervention, my words can be of some service to someone who needs to hear them. And with that in mind, I think I'm going to wrap this one up. I hope that answered your questions. If you have specific questions, again, hit me in the comments. I'll be happy to help if I can. And if I can't, I will do the one thing that so many people on the internet are mechanically incapable of doing, saying those three little words, I don't know. But if I do have to tell you, I don't know, I will always do the best I can to either find out or point you towards somebody who might know. So guys, thank you. Thank you for the chat. Thank you for everything you do. Keep your guard up. Do your drills. Be kind to yourself and each other. And as always, thank you for supporting your local swordmaster. I'll be back next week, most likely. I will be missing probably, I believe, I want to say Friday the 26th. I may be missing my programming. I have business that could happen. We have to look at our scheduling. Beyond that, have a lovely night, guys. And I hope to see you all real soon. Toodles.